Thad Brown here with you on the Endgame on a Thursday, day after Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane talk about the Sean McDermott firing. I've got to interrupt my Brandon Cooks rules discussion on social media to do a show today. I'm sorry about that. That's why I came in a little bit late today. But we will get to a little bit of Brandon Cooks stuff today. Mostly this will be about what happened yesterday in Orchard Park, the things that were said, things that weren't said, the reaction to the press conference, what we learned, and what we think about the Bills here going forward as they move into the post-Sean McDermott era today. Let's start with that press conference yesterday, and there's a whole lot to get to. Number one, I think, is obviously was the priority of the press conference, right? What's the point of us being there? To find out why Sean McDermott no longer has a job. And we got the answer from Terry Pegula that essentially he went into the locker room on Saturday night after the game and saw Josh Allen upset, saw players upset, described the scene pretty vividly, frankly. There was a lot in there about how Pegula said that he went to talk to Josh Allen and Josh did not acknowledge him a couple of different times, which led to a couple of jokes from people thinking that, wow, if Josh Allen had just said hi to the owner, Sean McDermott would still be here. And I don't think that's what it was. I think Terry Pegula saw the emotion, saw how hard his team was taking what happened in Denver, and that moved him to make a choice. Now, is it the way I would make a choice? No. Let me tell you, like, if my wife says that she wants me to buy a new lawnmower or something like that, or if we need a new chair, I'm going to go online and spend weeks studying it, look at all the details, read all the reviews, understand everything I can about that thing I'm about to buy, and then I'll go purchase it. And I feel good about doing it that way, even if I know it's a little bit obsessive to do that much research for, what could easily be a $50, $80, $100 purchase. But that's how I roll. In this case, Terry Pegula didn't want to do all that consideration. He didn't want to think about it for days or weeks. He didn't want to do a deep dive into whether it was the coaching staff or the personnel department that contributed more to the Bills' success or the Bills' inability to get to a Super Bowl. He saw a scene that struck him emotionally, and he made a decision. And I tend to believe him. And even if it might sound to you like a snap decision, like something that was done without care or consideration, it could also simply be that this was the moment, this was the thing that finally pushed Pegula over the top to want to fire Sean McDermott. And maybe he wasn't thinking about making the decision up until that point. But I would imagine at some point in the last few weeks, there had to be a thought in the owner's head that, can I still keep going on with my team in this fashion, with this regime, with these people in charge? And again, whether you like it or not, he's the owner. He gets to make that call. And no matter what you thought of Pegula's performance at the press conference yesterday, and we will talk plenty about that, he is a billionaire, which means he's done something that 99.999% of us can't and probably never will do. And I'm not going to get into all the details about what he did, it doesn't matter. He has accomplished that. So if he wants to look down his nose at you and say, I know better, he's kind of earned the right, whether that's an accurate statement or not. This is how it goes in professional sports. Owner signs the check, owner makes the decisions. And if he walks into that locker room and says, I can't have my team continue in this way any longer, that's what he's going to do. And whether he's right or wrong might entirely depend on who the next coach is. It might have nothing to do with this particular decision. If the Bills land on a coach that takes them to the promised land, then how the Bills got there will be of no one's concern. And I think you can certainly quibble with the process. You can look at this decision and say, this is only the future of the franchise. This is Josh Allen. This is probably going to be the last coach Josh Allen has in his prime. And whether or not it's Sean McDermott, there's certainly a good argument for, you sure don't want to think about this a little bit? You don't want to take a moment to just think about what's going on? Because when you decide this way, you do ignore what your other options are. Remember, firing Sean McDermott doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's going to happen in the context of who's available to be hired in his place this year. And we'll talk about this later too. The choices aren't superb. There are certainly, at least as it seems, better years to be needing a head coach. Evidenced by the fact that if you go online and start searching top candidates available, Sean McDermott's at the top of the list. Now, if the Bills had done this 2 weeks ago and would have had a shot at John Harbaugh or Kevin Stefanski, this would be a different call. But no, this decision was made 2 weeks into the postseason, which again is reasonable evidence to criticize the way Terry Pegula went about it. But this is his team, and he gets to make that call. And whether it would be the way I do it or the way you would do it, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't even make it the wrong choice. There's tons of Bills fans that have wanted Sean McDermott out for years. And there's, separate of how the decision was made, there's certainly plenty of reason to make the argument that Sean McDermott should go. He has had more than enough chances with this quarterback and this regime and this roster. And while I was surprised that the move happened, I can understand the thinking behind it, even if that thinking is kind of off the cuff, a little haphazard. It may not matter. And on the flip side, Terry Pegula could have been thinking about this for weeks and weeks and maybe not telling us and maybe wanting to lay it out as I went into that locker room and was overcome by the emotion of my players and had to make a decision. That might be a bald-faced lie, and he might have thought about this for weeks and weeks and not want to talk about it and is using this as the example. And again, the only thing that's going to matter is who the next coach is, who they go to from here. If they land on somebody that works, then there will be the winners write the history, right? If the Bills end up winners, then they can go back and spin this decision however they want, and no one will care in Western New York because they're celebrating a championship with Josh Allen. So I tend to buy what Terry said about the way he came to this decision. And even if it wasn't the way I would go about it, I'm generally okay with it because he signs the checks. That's the privilege you get when you end up in that spot. So that, I think, was controversy number one from that press conference. And controversy number two here had to do with Keon Coleman, who was an innocent bystander yesterday until he wasn't, when Terry Pegula decided to point out to everyone that the Keon Coleman draft pick was not Brandon Beane's idea. That was a coach's idea. That was the coaches wanted that one. It was Brandon Beane. The thing about that conversation that I think is probably the most viral part of the phenomena that went on at One Bills Drive on Monday or on Wednesday. Today, there's kind of a split about how people are reacting to it. Number one, there's a giant chunk of reaction out there that says, Keon Coleman is 22. He's a kid. He's still trying to figure out life. And again, he was not a part of that press conference yesterday. That press conference was about Sean McDermott and Terry Pegula and Brandon Beane. And yeah, the 2025 season was a part of it, and Keon Coleman was a not large but not insignificant part of that season. So sure, you could bring him up, but this was not a priority topic for yesterday. And yet there he is, frankly, becoming the biggest loser of that press conference yesterday. Because the owner said that the guy who still is in charge of the team didn't want him. Now, Brandon Beane spent the rest of the day trying to reel that thing back in and say that it was my pick and that we still believe in Keon, saying all the things you have to say to try and somehow keep that bridge that is absolutely scorching on fire right now from totally disintegrating. But we're probably in a spot now where the Bills have to trade away Keon Coleman. So I can understand where people would land in a spot about why did Keon deserve that? It wasn't his fault. This was not something that Keon should be taking blame for. And while I understand all that, I think the other part of this too is that even if Keon Coleman didn't need to be a part of that, even if it wasn't about him, the criticism that it didn't even take. It wasn't really like someone said Keon did anything wrong. It was almost like Terry Pegula assumed we all know that Keon is a problem child, and this problem child is being used to promote the GM who's staying and throw the coaching staff we're going to likely get rid of under the bus, assuming Joe Brady doesn't even get the head coaching job, which is a whole nother layer to this. Even though Keon Coleman probably didn't deserve to be a part of that, he did deserve to take the criticism. And while I understand people saying that, well, he's 22, that this is not a fully formed adult yet, in pro football, he is doing a big boy job, right? This is an adult responsibility that he has taken on being a football player. He's certainly being paid like an adult. Pick number 33 salary isn't the mega Josh Allen contract, but it's pretty good money. So I don't think it's unfair for Keon Coleman to take criticism, because he was the one who didn't show up to the meetings on time. He was the one who got benched multiple times last season. He was the one who didn't play well enough to avoid being a healthy scratch. So all of those things he earned. And even though it came out in the press conference yesterday in an unusual way, in an unexpected and probably inappropriate way, I can't sit here and have much sympathy for Keon, because the reason he's being used as a pawn in the who I want to blame game conducted by Terry Pegula yesterday are things that are entirely within his control and things that he should easily be more responsible for. It'd be one thing if Keon Coleman just wasn't playing well. If he was doing all the right things, working hard, showing up on time, listening to the coaches, being good in the media, I guess would probably be part of this too, and he just wasn't playing well, then I think you might feel some empathy. Then you're like, geez, Terry, I mean, not every player is great. What are you doing? But the reason Keon Coleman was in the middle of that is Keon Coleman. So to feel sorry for him, although I understand it, and yes, none of us at 22 years old had our crap together enough to where we would not make any mistakes. I get that. But if you're gonna give Keon Coleman the millions of dollars he's making, and you're a professional, this is how it works. If you're a professional, you are now open to the criticism. You are going to take the arrows. You're going to deal with the media asking you questions. You're going to deal with fans questioning you. And I guess if you play for the Bills, you're going to deal with the owner every once in a while, randomly deciding to use you as evidence, as a pawn in whatever game he's pushing with trying to justify his decision to keep the GM and fire the head coach. So I can't, again, feel totally sorry for Keon Coleman in this. Now, the other part of this is, did Terry Pegula really need to open that door? The question was, and I know some people have kind of questioned the question. The question was about the wide receiver group in general. And Keon Coleman's name was added to that, maybe because he is the member of that group with which the most assets have been used, the high second round pick. So I can understand singling him out to a degree as the guy, but this question was not about Keon Coleman. It was about receivers in general, and Terry Pegula jumps in and says, wait. Let me address Keon. I want to take care of Keon. And that's a part of the reason why this press conference was eye-rolled by most of the country, if not outright laughed at. I understand you want to justify, if you're the owner, that the head coach was the one you think should take the fall and the GM is the one who should stay. There are other ways to do that without throwing one of your own players under the bus as a method to do that. It just was not handled very well. And I think appropriately was called out by, many people around the country. And the unfortunate thing here is that now Keon Coleman probably has to be traded. I don't think you can, I guess it's possible. We'll sit here right now reacting to this thing that happened 24 hours ago and say the emotions of that, the result of that are just unchangeable, unfixable. And it's not always true. Time heals all wounds, right? The Bills don't have to show up to the facility again until April for offseason conditioning. There are weeks with which the Bills could use to try and rebuild the Keon relationship. Now, there's a question about, is it worth it? Like I said, the guy hasn't played well enough. So do you want to make the effort to fix that? Or do you want to just pack him off for whatever you can get and wipe your hands of the situation. I think choice B might be the answer. Keep in mind that after what the owner just said and the way this all looks, everybody else in the league is going to know that you want to get rid of him. And if the Bills get anything for him, I think really the going price for Keon Coleman right now is going to be that old 6th, 7th round pick swap, which is literally next to nothing. So separate of, you can debate whether Keon deserves sympathy or whether Terry Pegula should have made the comment. But the reality is the Bills have probably stuck themselves in a spot where either they keep Keon Coleman or they get rid of him for really far under market value. Either way, it just was not the right call by the owner. And I've had a lot of people ask me over the last few hours, I should say, if it really felt that bad. Because this press conference is being panned across the country. I was, even being inside of it, I was a little surprised about how much criticism, how much disdain, how much, again, eye roll that football people across the country had for the performance of Terry Pegula in particular and the Bills in general over the last 36 hours. I don't think it was as bad as many people across the country made it out to be. Because the problems, the things that were wrong about that press conference are the Keon Coleman thing, and then the argument that Terry Pegula was making that I'm going to fire the coach based on the loss to Denver, but also the loss to Denver was incorrect because it was about a bad call by the official. You really can't play that one both ways. If you think the refs made a bad call, why are you firing your coach because of it? So maybe if you want to argue that the whole I walked into the locker room and that was too much emotion for me is not accurate, this is exactly how you do it, because the connection here between the officials hosed us and this was the reason I wanted to fire my coach doesn't make much sense. But in terms of how the press conference was, other than those two things, I can't really point to anything else that either Terry or Brandon said that was inappropriate or embarrassing to the organization. I thought most of the rest of it was handled more or less appropriately. We're going to get to a soundbite in a minute here that I have a problem with, but it's not embarrassing. It's just a professional disagreement kind of thing. So while the Bills got destroyed for this press conference, and locally, the same happened based on how they handled the whole thing. Look, misspelling the press release is ridiculously bad. Not putting Sean McDermott's goodbye note on the team website is probably reprehensible because the Steelers and Ravens both did that for their outgoing longtime head coaches this offseason. So this was not handled well top to bottom. And one of the things about this whole situation is that there are so many Bills fans who for years have been screaming from the rooftops about Sean McDermott has to go. And now that he's finally gone, it still feels like nobody's happy. And I don't think it's because of the decision. I think it's because of the clumsy, embarrassing way the team has handled just about everything that's happened since the decision was made, starting with a ridiculous misspelling in the press release and ending with the press conference yesterday, which, yes, I don't think was as bad as the general opinion seems to be describing it as, but there were two pretty large gaffes by the owner that you might just shake your head at. And I get part of this is, it's like the old, other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? There might have only been two things, but Mrs. Lincoln would tell you those two things are the bullet and her husband's head being in the way of it. Those are pretty big things. You can't ignore those things. Same thing for this. So I get why this was not a proud moment for the Buffalo Bills organization, even if I don't know if it was quite as bad as everybody is making it out to be. All right. One of the things that I totally bought into that was talked about at this press conference, there was an idea that Brandon Beane engineered this firing, that it was some sort of like power play thing, that he made sure Sean McDermott was the one who got the door if it ever came to a head, the relationship. I don't think that is accurate at all. I do think that it's possible and probably likely that the relationship between McDermott and Beane soured to some degree towards the end of this. The Beane and Pegula both said that the relationship had not dissolved. That was their word. I think that word was a question asked by someone in the media. But they said, look, no, Beane was like, I was still talking to him. I was still talking to him about personnel moves. We had a good relationship. I think that was probably all true, but I also don't think the relationship was anywhere near as good as it was the first 4, 5, 6, 7 years when they were together running the Bills. So, but even if the relationship isn't great, there's a difference between, yeah, I'm not quite getting along with my coworker like I used to, and maybe it might be time for a change, and engineering a power play to make that happen. And Bean talked about that yesterday in terms of why he felt like not only was that something that would never happen, but to the point where he felt like it was pretty insulting.
Back.
Okay. Apparently, I blew the editing of that soundbite. Let's go back to me. All right. I wondered why that filed away pretty quick. Looks like I just filed away the end of it. I'll play that for everybody here when we come back from the break here in a few minutes. But so Brandon Bean was pretty vehement that this was not something he would do. He called it BS that someone would accuse him of that. He talked about how when his wife heard about it, she was in tears. That part I buy. In part because of what I've known from just dealing with Brandon Bean. Both he and Sean McDermott, to me, everything I've seen, seem like good men. They're guys who have the right attitude, the right priorities. Brandon Bean is a great people person. And there's a part of this where it might not be an outright power play, and I don't think it is. Is it possible that because Bean is the one who sits up in the owner's booth and talks to Terry Pegula every game and gets to know him and builds a relationship more? And if you're going to have, like I said on Monday, if you're going to have Brandon Bean sitting next to you for all these games, you're probably going to get along with him because Brandon Bean is that kind of guy. He's a good dude. He's a good people person. So based on that, and then the other thing that makes me feel pretty good that this wasn't a power play was the idea that Terry Pegula probably made this decision on Saturday. If you in the organization don't see this coming, and Steve Tasker talked on the Dan Patrick Show on Monday that no one in the building thought Sean McDermott was going to get fired. If that's where you're at, and that decision was made on a random Saturday night after a loss in the thick of the emotions of the end of the season, I think it's hard for someone else to be behind some sort of power play. So I know people have really gotten down on Brandon Bean in terms of his part in this. I don't think he was a part of it. I don't think he helped to get Sean McDermott fired. I don't think he was going behind his back. I don't think he was trying to whisper sweet nothings into the owner's ear to make sure that he was the one who stayed and Sean McDermott was the one who went. This was Terry Pegula's call. And was it maybe based a little subconsciously on his relationship with the GM? Possibly. But this was not something that I think Brandon Bean would or did go behind Sean McDermott's back to create. This is how it went down. He was the one who stayed because this is what the owner wanted. Maybe good fortune more than anything else. Brandon Bean is still good at his job. It isn't like Brandon Bean isn't a talented general manager. He's been certainly better than average and probably a lot better than that over his 9 years here. Now, obviously, Sean McDermott is too. So it's not fair. You would think that McDermott goes and Bean stays, but I don't think Bean is staying. People are talking about him failing upwards. I don't know if that's the case. He's in the same spot as McDermott. He could have easily been fired, but they both could have easily been retained too. And the promotion makes you feel a little weird, but I don't put this on Bean as something that he did wrong, that he was nefarious about. He was the guy the owner picked. Sometimes it's that simple. And you may disagree with it. I may disagree with it. I don't know if I do. I think I probably would have kept both guys if it were me running the team. But again, I was not in that locker room after the game. And it still is going to be weird that Pegula decided to fire one guy and keep the other and to fire the guy who seemed to be doing a better job. But all of that doesn't mean that Brandon Bean is not a reasonable, if not highly qualified candidate to be the general manager and person running this team. He's done a good job in general over the years. And really, again, the opinion of this and Bean staying is once again going to be determined by who the next coach is and how good that guy is. One thing I did have a problem with what Brandon Bean said yesterday. Remember back after the trade deadline, there was a question about if Brandon still believed the Bills had a championship roster, even though they didn't add anybody new at the trade deadline. He said then, yes, he did. even if it felt like, what else are you going to say? That comment was shined under the spotlight a little more because a few days later, Sean McDermott got essentially the same question and punted it to, I love my guys. So while the GM, I don't know if he has another thing he wants to say other than, I think this is a championship roster, the head coach kind of put it under the microscope saying maybe that this is not a championship roster. So yesterday, Brandon Beane gets another question about, hey, you said this was a championship roster. Do you still believe that? Here's what he said.
We went to Jacksonville and we won, a good team. And then we went to Denver, who was the 1 seed, and we obviously had turnovers in the game, but I would say we had every chance to win that game and as I said earlier, not be playing here. So we didn't get it done, but it doesn't mean that we didn't have the opportunity or have a team that could have gotten it done.
You can't really sell me on we didn't have an opportunity or the team that could get it done because you played Denver tight. That's not buying that. This is not a year, first of all, to where you sell me as you had a championship roster because you hung with the 1 seed in the AFC. This AFC at the top has been suspect all season long. We talked all year long about how outside of Pittsburgh, who no one took seriously, and the Chargers, who just had no offensive line left, any of the other 5 teams, any of those other 5 teams could easily have been the one to get out of this conference. And that's an example underlining that there was not an elite team. Everybody had flaws. Everybody had something that you could point to and say, I don't know if they can get around this. For the Bills, it was receivers and run defense. For the Broncos, it's a very mediocre offense, which now is without its starting quarterback. That's a whole different discussion. For the Patriots, it was they played a terrible schedule all year. For Houston, it was an even worse offense than what Denver has. For Jacksonville, it was a pass defense. And the fact that, Trevor Lawrence had never done it before. And most of these quarterbacks had never done it before. So everybody had flaws. So the fact that the Bills had a chance against the 1 seed doesn't tell me anything about being a championship roster. If the Rams go and win a Super Bowl, Panthers played them pretty close. You're going to tell me the Panthers had a championship roster? No one's going to buy that. So I'm not going to be convinced this was ever a championship roster. And I don't know if Brandon Beane would have been better off to say that. Again, you're in a spot where with the GM, I don't know what else he's supposed to say. But this was not a championship roster. Most of us knew that since like October. Brandon Cooks provided a little bit of a boost to the wide receiver room that made you think they might be able to navigate their way through the AFC. But no matter who comes out of the AFC, I think most of us would take the NFC team and lay the points right this second. So just getting to the Denver game, being in the divisional round and saying we had an opportunity, that is not evidence that you had a championship roster. This was not a championship roster. It just wasn't. It just wasn't. Some years, there are years where teams that don't have championship rosters still find their way through the playoffs because of bounces and breaks. Well, the Bills didn't get them, in large part because their quarterback turned the ball over 4 times. But they didn't get the officials' calls to go their way, even though I don't think many of them were wrong. They were close enough to where they could have gone their way. It didn't happen. But that was how this team was going to get to a championship. Not because the roster was championship level. They were going to have all the breaks go their way. And when that did not happen, they were out. I mean, you can think that way inside the building. I get that. To where you believe in your guys. You think that your plan can work. But once it's done, now that we've gotten to this point and we've seen what the Bills are, and this was not, Josh Allen had a bad day, but this is what the Bills have been all year long. They've been inconsistent and unable to put together 60-minute games week after week after week. And that's what it was going to take to get out of the AFC this year because no one was good. No one was good enough to just rely on their talent and their roster to slide through the AFC. You needed to put together 3 60-minute games, or in the case of the Patriots, put together 2 games and then get lucky with a backup quarterback in the championship. Regardless, this roster was not going to be good enough. And to continue to push now that it was a championship roster because you had the opportunity to hang in with the 1 seed in the conference that's probably going to get pounded in the Super Bowl this year, I don't buy it one bit. Maybe the worst moment of the day from Brandon Beane, and he was generally pretty good in this press conference. He was certainly the better of the two. But I'm not going to sit here and just let Brandon Beane say that this was a championship roster because they got close. It was not accurate. It was not accurate in midseason. It was not accurate at the end of the season. There was a little bit of hope that Brandon Cooks might be enough to push them over the top in the playoffs, and it didn't work out that way. As it worked out, Brandon Cooks was in the middle of the play that but began what turned out to be the final drive of the season. We're going to talk about Brandon Cooks, too, in a minute. He was on NFL Network today, in a way that I was kind of surprised about. I'm going to get to that after this. In terms of what the NFL is, what they obviously are, and their priorities, and why this league is so tough to kind of take seriously sometimes, because their goals are very naked and very hard to get behind. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what the Bills might need with their next coach after a break. My name is Thad Brown. This is Rock One. You're watching the Endgame on a Thursday, and we are back right after this. Thad Brown back here with you on the Endgame. Let me get to that soundbite that I missed in the first segment there. This was, again, let's see if I got it right this time. Brandon Beane talking about why he was, I guess, insulted, certainly, that he was accused of trying to stage a power play with Sean McDermott.
Those are harmful things that, I walk in the door and my wife's got tears coming down her face for stuff like that. And I'm going to damn try hard to win a Super Bowl. Here I am. But for somebody to question my character like that, it is BS. And I've never done that. If you'll remember, in 2023, there was an article written on Sean accusing things. Who stood up in front of every one of you guys and defended him and his family and everything he's done here? And then we went to Kansas City, and we won that game. And I went down to Jeff Missouri and said, give me a game ball. I'm going to show everyone that this team has his back.
So that was the part that I believed in the most from that press conference, based on, again, what I heard about how the decision to move on from Sean McDermott happened. And then that, too, you can see the passion right there. That seems like something that Brandon Beane was pretty emotional about. And you can understand why. This is not a guy who has been accused of being a bad dude. Like I said, he's generally been a good guy from everything that I've seen and dealt with him over the years. So this is not something that he is going to take lightly or dismiss or be able to gloss over. And so I can understand him wanting to address it that way. And I don't think that Beane was trying to stage any sort of coup to get Sean McDermott out of the way so he could take over that organization. So now the Bills are on to whatever coach comes next, and there are questions that come with that. Like I said, the field this year is not super when it comes to needing a new head coach. I think a lot of people have had Brian Dable be at the top of the list, and he makes a lot of sense. I'll explain that in a minute here. But outside of Dable, most of the good options available right now are all younger coordinator type guys. And that's typically what you do this time of year, right? You go out and try and find the next new young thing, the next smart guy, the next guy that you can build an organization with. That's what you traditionally do when you're firing a coach, because most of the time you fire a coach when you lose 12 games, not win them like the Bills did. The Bills are in a rare spot where they're going to hire a coach for a team that could go to the Super Bowl next year. And not only that, a team that, as the fan base has proven over the last few years, will almost accept nothing less. The problem is There have only been 5 rookie coaches all time who have gone to a Super Bowl, and only 2 of them have done it since the 80s. It was Bill Callahan with the Raiders in that game where John Gruden got fired by the Raiders, took over with the Bucs the next year, took Tampa Bay to the Super Bowl, and met the Raiders with Bill Callahan. So that was one. And the other one was Jim Caldwell with the Colts when they lost to the Saints back in 2009. Other than that, the other 3 guys, it's like Super Bowl 5, George Seifert taking over a Niners team that had won a Super Bowl the year before, and Red Miller with the Broncos, like Super Bowl 12. So a rookie head coach going to a Super Bowl in year 1, pretty unlikely. So if the Bills are going to go down that road where they want to try and grab young coordinator X, the overwhelming likelihood is that you're going to punt on 2026, that is not going to be a Super Bowl year because there's just too much that goes on when it comes to being a head coach. Brandon Beane talked about it yesterday, that being a head coach is more about being a CEO than it is about X's and O's and getting down in the dirt and coaching football players. There's a lot to be learned. How to manage your time, how to manage everybody else's time because you're in charge of setting all the schedules, how to deal with the media, how to be the front-facing person in the organization, not just in the media, but in community events and to the community in general. There's a lot that goes into that job that you can't just roll into and figure out, which is why it's hard, I think, especially now with the more scrutiny that's paid to being a coach in the NFL than it was in the 70s and 80s, why it's so hard for a rookie coach to go to a Super Bowl. Now, to be fair, like I said, most of the time those rookie coaches are not taking over Josh Allen in a Super Bowl ready roster. But I think it's hard. It's going to be hard to expect if the Bills want to take Grant Udzinski, I think I pronounced it correctly, or Jesse Minter, or even Davis Webb, who is being talked about for this job, and I'll get to him in a second here, and expect that guy to just roll in year 1 and go to a Super Bowl. It doesn't mean you don't want to hire one of those guys. Because I think I can make a pretty good argument. And the more I've thought about this, the more I think I'm on board with it. I would rather just dump 2026. And look, again, you're not necessarily going into that season with 0 chance. You still have Josh Allen. But even if my likelihood of going to a Super Bowl in year 1 with a new coach is low, I would rather sign up for a guy that I feel good about and then go into years 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and think that I can make a big run. Because if, let's say, the Bills find their Jimmy Johnson, their Andy Reid, their Phil Jackson, whatever you want to call it, yeah, it might not work year 1 because the guy's still getting his feet wet and figuring out how to do the job. But if he can do the job, that is the kind of dynasty building fuel that I would sign up for, even if it has to cost me a season. The other part of this, too, the Bills do have a pretty legitimate option if they want to go in with someone who has head coaching experience with Brian Daboll. He'd be such an easy fit. He'd roll in. He knows the media. He knows the room. He knows where his offices are. He knows Terry Pagula. He knows a lot of the players. He's good buddies with Josh. Everything would be easy. But as I tell my daughter all the time, easier is not always better. In fact, most of the time it's not. Doesn't mean that Brian Daboll is not the right man for the job, or in this case, the best man for the job. Because again, even the coordinator pool this year is not superb. But I think the big part of this decision, or one of the big parts of this decision, not the only big part, is do you go with someone who has experience that gives you a chance to hit the ground running and be more likely to take that team to a Super Bowl? Or do you try and go with a rookie coach, bet on the upside, understanding that year 1 probably is not going to work out for you? The more I think about it, the more I'd go, in general, in a vacuum, the more I'd go with choice 2, with the rookie guy. In part because as much as I like Brian Daboll, the way that ended with the Giants, I do have questions about whether or not he can manage the top job. And I love the guy. I'd love to have him back in Buffalo. It'd be great to work with him all the time. But we all saw what happened in New York. There's really questions about whether or not this is a job he's appropriately suited for. And maybe he's learned from that. And maybe he understands that things have to be better the next time. And maybe outside of the general pressure cooker that is New York City, he'll do a better job, especially in a place where he's comfortable in Buffalo. I don't really have a lean right now in terms of the guy I prefer. I think, like I said, in general, I would want to try to and play the upside of the young guy. If you look at a current assistant, a Minter or whatever, and you think this guy could really be the next big thing, then I'd probably roll with that and not worry about year one. But if you think Brian Daboll's the right fit, I'm fine with that too. I think the Bills have a bunch of B and B plus options. Guys that you look at and say, this could work. A lot of people like Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator from the Chargers. Udzinski, the coordinator who was under Liam Cohen in Jacksonville. I'm always a little suspicious of a guy who's an assistant to the guy and not running his own thing. Like Minter, that's his defense with the Chargers. You feel better about that. Liam Cohen is the guy in Jacksonville. Now, to be fair, Liam Cohen was the guy under Dave Canales when they were both in Tampa a few years ago, and then Canales goes to Carolina. Cohen does well with the Bucs. He gets a job with Jacksonville, and that worked out fine. So obviously it can work, but I'm always a little more leery of taking the guy who's the assistant to the guy. But again, overall, this is not an inspiring pool of candidates. And I really, sitting here right now, if you wanted to sell me on any number of them, I would probably buy in. I'd probably be like, okay, I can see that happening. Davis Webb is the one guy I want to get to. He's had all of 2 years of coaching experience. He's never been a coordinator. He is currently the passing game coordinator in Denver. Again, he's the guy under the guy because Sean Payton is the guy. So he's not only the guy under the guy, he's the guy under the guy on a team where his side of the ball isn't even the good one. So there's a lot of questions on the face of the Davis Webb idea. But when he was in Buffalo, players and coaches would not stop talking about how much they loved what he did behind the scenes, even as a backup quarterback, and how good a coach he would be. And clearly, since he's left Buffalo and gone out to start his coaching career, none of that has slowed down. Everybody still loves Davis Webb. If he does not get a head coaching job this year, which I think is probably likely considering, again, he's literally 31 and he's had 2 years of coaching experience, any coaching experience, not just like coordinator or high level, any coaching experience, 2 years. This guy was a player 3 years ago. So I still feel like it's probably unlikely he gets a head coaching job. But the talk and the buzz around Davis Webb is so off the charts that whether it's the Bills or someone else, I could see a team wanting to get ahead of the curve, get on board, deal with the growing pains, and try and realize what could be one of the elite coaches. Because there is not a person you talk to or hear about in this league who will describe Davis Webb with anything less than the highest of praise. And in Buffalo, it's an even tougher sell. If you put Davis Webb as the head coach in Arizona or with the Raiders, you got 3 years to build that up. You could wait and let that guy figure it out as the team figures it out. In Buffalo, like I said, being a rookie coach is hard enough as it is. With Webb having so little experience, you might, when I say you got to punt on 2026, you might have to punt on 2 years with Davis Webb. But again, the upside with him is so tantalizing, it makes it hard to ignore as an idea. Now, he's good buddies with Josh Allen, and there's been a few people that have pointed out maybe that's not the best way to go about choosing a head coach, or not the best head coach to have if he's really good friends with the quarterback. At least not a bad relationship, but I can understand that too. Webb will be a fascinating one. Like I said, if he does not get a job this year, one of the next 2 years, he is going to be the Ben Johnson of that cycle. He's going to be the guy that everybody wants. Do the Bills get on board with him now? Could he come in and be the head coach and let Brian Daboll be the coordinator and make it a little easier? I think right now, and I know it's the easy one that fans will throw out because those are the names everybody knows. I do think Webb and Daboll in some combo, no matter who is on top of the food chain, is probably the highest floor, safest choice. Doesn't make it the right choice because, again, Super Bowl or nothing is all that matters in Buffalo. But I do think that's the one that you can easily wrap yourself in and feel warm about, as opposed to Coordinator X, even if Coordinator X has a chance to be a pretty good choice too. All right, let me get to this Brandon Cooks thing. So Brandon Cooks was on NFL Network today, and I reposted it with a comment today on X, Thad Brown 7 on X. And the discussion was about, or at least the part of the discussion that was posted by Mike Garafolo, was about Cooks and, of course, the catch in overtime. And Cooks, as you might expect, continued to say, I caught the ball. I felt like I caught the ball, all that stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary. The thing that really kind of got me with this is, if you're the NFL, what you are doing here is taking one of your own players, putting him on your own network so he can criticize your own officials. And you kind of let them sit there and be ignorant of what the rules are. Because Cook is talking about my shoulder was down, my back was down. None of that matters when it comes to making a catch. So what does the NFL exactly care about here? Are you just taking one of your own guys, putting him on your own state-sponsored broadcast television, letting him say things that are probably incorrect based on the rules, and even if they are correct, they're criticizing you? What's the point here? And this is kind of something I've been thinking about when it comes to the NFL and officiating, because I've always wondered why the league doesn't make more of an effort to just educate fans about the rules. The rules are expansive. They are detailed. There's so much to them. I do understand the average fan who wants to spend 3 hours on a Sunday with a beer, just kind of taking a break from life. They don't want to have to also do homework and read through War and Peace to understand why my favorite player did or did not make a catch. I get all that. But the rules aren't that hard. There are ways that you can kind of lay them out to people and say, this is what a catch is, this is what a holding penalty is, this is what pass interference is, and make it more understandable. And part of this, too, is you're fighting an uphill battle against the world of social media, which is more than happy to sell the angst of something like this for engagement than they are to actually explain what the correct answer would be or why a rule is what it is. Remember, you ever heard of rage bait? Nothing is easier rage bait or faster rage bait than the officials screwed up. So that's a part of it that, yeah, you probably as the NFL could go out there and educate your fan base about the rules, but people are way more interested in being angry and clicking on why this call was wrong and why this is rigged and why the refs are cheating and why this is pro wrestling than they are to understand the details of the 3 steps of making a catch. But this video, this opportunity today by Brandon Cooks, to me, kind of cemented the idea that even if that was possible, even if the NFL wanted to, I mean, it is possible, even if the NFL wanted to go around and start educating its fan base better about what rules are and what's supposed to happen, they don't want to. They don't want to. Because for them, the buzz of having Brandon Cooks on their air, on their station, complaining about the refs, that's going to draw eyeballs. That's going to get people talking. And that's all the league cares about. It's not about whether you and I understand the rules of the game. It's not even about the employees of the league, whether it be the officials or their players. Because I'm pretty sure what Cooks thinks about the rule of making a catch is not what the rule is. And after being in the league a decade doing this job, one would think he would know. To be fair, they've changed the rules a number of times, so it's not totally crazy. He's not aware of what the rule is. But I think it's pretty clear the NFL don't care. They don't care who looks bad. They don't care if you don't understand what's going on. They don't care if I don't understand what's going on. They don't care how the referees look. They don't care how their players look. All they care about is getting that buzz. All they care about is that engagement, your eyeballs. Doesn't have to be right. Doesn't have to be correct, fair, accurate. You just got to be watching it. And this is not surprising by the league. This is a league that's happy to put football games on Christmas to make an extra buck. This is a league that's happy to put games on Thursday all year long and make it hard on players to make a buck. This is soon going to be a league that's going to add an extra game. that's going to be even further hard on players. And they may not even add it with an extra bye week. They absolutely should. If they're going to go 18 games, there better be 2 weeks off for these guys. They don't care. They will do whatever it takes to extract dollars from your wallet or time from your eyeballs on your social media feed. Even if what Brandon Cooks is saying is wrong. Even if what he says makes the league's officials look bad. The league just doesn't care. And although it's something I've kind of thought for a few years, that today cemented it in my head. And man, if you want to say I'm slow to that, you're probably fine. I would probably agree that this is something the league has been doing and showing and using examples of for a while. And the fact that I'm just realizing it now, maybe I'm the slow one here. Now, someone on X pointed out to me, though, that it was like for someone who a pro Bills fan, who kind of liked the fact that Cooks was out there calling it a catch because it was kind of the Bills side of the argument, right? And I can understand that. If you want to take a less nefarious, skeptical, cynical view of it, the idea that, well, hey, Bills fans are kind of mad about this. Let's put one of their guys on. We'll let him say what he thinks, even if we know it's wrong. And at least it makes the Bills fans feel good. And no one else is going to get mad about it. The Denver doesn't care. You're going to play a game this weekend. Their fans are fine. But if you put Brandon Cooks on, it does give Bills fans a little pump, a little, grease the tires a little bit, make them feel okay for a second. I can get that. I can get behind that. And the other part of it, too, is, to be fair, Brandon Cooks is a newsmaker this week. You want to put a newsmaker on. But, again, for the league to just throw it up there and promote it and say, look at our player who probably doesn't know what the rule is and is saying our referees don't know what they're doing. And, Cooks was not, by the way, Cooks also was not terrible with this. He was not, those refs are idiots and they should never work. He was just making his case about what the call was. So it wasn't the worst thing ever, but it's still, like, if I'm running a league, this is not how I run a league. I don't take one of my employees, have them sit in front of national TV that I'm then going to spin out to all of my social media and allow him to think something is true that's not, allow him to continue to talk about it. And even if he is right, that makes the other people who work in my game look bad. I would not operate my league this way. And maybe I would not be making billions of dollars either if I operated my league this way. Speaking of operating, one more thing I want to get to before we're done here. Terry Pegula talked yesterday about how the reason he hasn't been in the media is because what he's gone through with his wife, Kim, and a number of other things, that he's not anything against the media. He doesn't have any, hold any grudges or anything, I guess is the term I'm going to use. We'll see if he comes out and talks again, because obviously what happened yesterday did not go over very well. But if he doesn't ever speak to the media, or if he's going to take another 5-6 years before his next opportunity, I'm kind of okay with that. As someone who works in this business, I will always kind of point to that there are certain responsibilities that players, coaches, and owners have when it comes to addressing the fans, and addressing them through the media, at least for the moment, is still the best and most efficient and most logical way to do that. So the owner should talk to the media at least once a year, and just about all of them do. But I think we saw with what happened on Wednesday that talking to the media is just not in Terry Pegula's wheelhouse. It is not where he excels. He clearly excels other places because he's a billionaire who saved football for Buffalo. But being in front of a microphone is just not his thing. And if he does not come back out to speak to the media once a year, very often, we'll see. He'll probably talk a little bit whenever the Bills hire a new coach, and that would be an appropriate time. I'm fine with that. Even though I'm the kind of person that in general would say the owner has to talk, it is his responsibility to address the fans. And there have been many reasons for the fans in Western New York, whether football or hockey related, to want to hear from Terry Pegula. Despite all that, we are all good and bad at different things, and it does not seem like Terry Pegula is good in front of a microphone. And if that is the reason the Bills and or the Sabres do not offer him to the media very much over the next few years, I'm kind of fine with it, even if I think many others in the media would have a problem with that, at least locally, because we all want to have access to those stories. We want to hear what the decision makers and the news makers have to say and have to think. What Terry Pegula said about why Sean McDermott got fired was certainly interesting. It was revealing. It was helpful, even if it didn't make a ton of sense in terms of, I'm going to move on from Sean McDermott because we lost this game, but also we lost this game because the refs hosed us. Not having that from the team point of view, I can understand them wanting to avoid it. And if that's where this goes, I'm not going to have a huge problem with it because we kind of saw on Wednesday what it can be. And the end result of this was, whether fair or not, the end result of this was the team with egg on its face nationally. And again, I don't think the press conference was that bad, but you can't totally dismiss some of the different gaffes that happened in that press conference. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We are back again on Thursday next week. I got a family thing, so nothing from me on Monday. We will certainly keep you up to date on what's going on with the Bills coaching search. Remember, check out BKL Nightly. That'll be on again tonight. Me and Rachel Liebert and Caleb Carr. 8:30, we'll talk a little more about what we saw yesterday, where the Bills go from here. Thanks very much for watching today on Rochester First. Remember, all the cool kids, they call it Rock One. I'm Thad Brown. This is the Endgame. Like I said, I'll be back again with you on Thursday.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 on demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.